Hello, everybody. We're glad you are here with us. Hey, we've got some housekeeping things real quick. So normally when you watch us, you're watching us on YouTube or you are on your favorite podcast platform. If you are listening to us on a podcast, we are changing our location. So you are going to need to search CCC Greeley Podcast from now on. So
we're moving.
We're getting our own place.
Why?
Great question.
Explain the heart behind that.
I think we kind of really want to, we've been experimenting, I would say, this past year in what this podcast is and what we want it to be. And I think we just want to be a little more intentional moving forward and giving it its own space. And we are so glad you guys are here with us. We thank you for, you are loyal and we love that. And we just want to kind of, get
I got
more people to view
over
too.
the Christmas season. I got asked by someone, "Hey, how do I pull a podcast?" And I said, "Oh, it's easy." And then I got on my phone. I'm like,
It's not easy.
I don't know where it is.
What are all these sermons?
And so I assumed it was easy, but that assumption was wrong.
Yeah.
So
And then there's the group of people that were excited to listen to the sermon and were very disappointed to have found us. It's like, what is this?
This is a weird church.
Just a conversation.
If you are watching us on YouTube, which I know a lot of you do, don't worry. That is, we're going to stay there.
Yeah.
We will have a new thumbnail that will say CCC Greeley podcast on there. So it'll be easier to find when you're on there as well.
Yeah.
nice. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right, so I got something to just bring up that I thought was kind of fun. I value a ton just the heartbeat of curiosity, and so during our sermon on Saturday and Sunday, that Mariana gave, and she had the cube and things in the passage, she's explained the journey the disciples had gone on, and it said a Sabbath day's walk, and I've seen that passage a bazillion times, don't even think about it, but I'm just sitting there and I AI'd what is a Sabbath day's walk, and AI pops up this whole thing explaining what a Sabbath day's walk is. I get so. Also, I'm sitting by myself. Okay, I'm sitting by myself.
You completely stopped listening at this point.
Well, I
You were inspired.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I got goosebumps. I'm looking at it and I'm like, I have to share this with somebody. And so I looked behind me and there was an empty seat by the person behind me, and I just jumped back there and I was like, look at this. And I think he just kind of played it along and was like, oh, that's pretty cool.
You're like, no.
I'm like, this is the coolest thing. I enjoy finding things that I haven't ever seen before, thought of before, and so I just thought I would share it here because I think it's easy to take concepts in the Bible or terms in the Bible and just interpret them how our brains interpret them. For instance, a Sabbath day. If I think about a Sabbath day, the first thing I think is it's a 24-hour day. The Jews are big on it's a full 24 hours. It's 24 hours. And so in the sermon, Mariana said a Sabbath day's walk, and then she said it's pretty short. And I thought, well, 24 hours isn't very short.
Right, that's a long time.
Yeah, and so there was this juxtaposition in my mind.
Nice.
Pull up the Sabbath day's journey. And a Sabbath day's journey is how much the rabbis believe someone can travel in a day and they don't break a sweat. So they're not breaking
2,000
Sabbath.
cubits,
Yeah.
right?
It's not far.
Yeah, so that's about a half a mile.
Yeah.
Can you remind us where it popped up in the sermon? Like it was from this location to this location. Do you remember?
I don't because
cool.
I tuned out.
Great.
Like I was tuned in on
Yeah.
Sabbath day.
Your brain was on a roll. That's
Sabbath
great.
day.
So you know what's cool about that though? Like if you go to Israel today, they actually have these markers
No way.
that are up in the city that everyone can see for the Sabbath that like alert you, hey, this is how far you can travel from where you are and not violate the Sabbath.
Yeah, I think that's incredible.
Yeah.
I had forgotten just forgotten how easy it is to assume things. Assuming I have the answers, that kind of thing. So I had so much fun just on this tiny concept of a Sabbath day and the Sabbath day's walk. And Pastor Allen has a sermon coming up that he brings content that I haven't heard of before. And so I think there's this this curiosity that I'm hoping our podcast can kind of embody going forward and bringing stuff that's really tiny but super fun.
Yeah. I think we already do that in a big way, but it's a good call out, just like calling, oh, sorry, I touched your knee, Nathan.
It's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay.
For those of you only listening.
That's what just happened.
Actually, they wouldn't have seen that anyways.
Tiny but powerful.
But yeah, it's I don't know, there's been a lot of moments here where it's we all tripped down a well together, but there was diamonds at the bottom of it. And it's ooh, this is really cool.
Ouch.
Well, and I think, that curiosity, had you never taken the time to actually sit down and look up what that was, your mind never would have been going down that, well or whatever you want to call it with diamonds at the bottom. And I think, we talked about this idea of resolutions and all that kind of stuff. It's either our last podcast or the podcast before. But just even thinking about my own life, being in a position where I ask questions.
Yeah.
Because that's not I think sometimes we live at such a frantic pace in life. And we have this ethos that tells us, hey, we have to be an expert on everything. It's well, no, it's actually okay to not know stuff. That's a really, really good thing. That's actually pretty healthy to be able to admit that. And I know, in our culture, we're not supposed to do that, but to admit it to ourselves at least and to begin asking questions, who knows what we might stumble upon if we do that?
Yeah, it's good. It's really good.
It makes me think of, we have a friend of ours who, for his birthday every year, sends out this
Are you talking about the birthday survey?
This birthday survey, yes.
It's so long.
It's so good though, and I was surprised how I felt, how long I took. Maybe
Hold on.
people.
Explain the birthday survey
Well,
for
I
the people.
might not give it justice,
That's
but I
okay.
can just say
all
what
of
it
us
is.
can help.
Yeah, okay.
Because all of us are participants
Absolutely.
in the birthday survey.
I'm only halfway through taking it so far. I still got to finish.
So it's
man, I sat
actually our
down and I got the
editor,
job
the
done.
person who edits this is the guy who does it. But he sends out this survey and it's got these just amazing questions. Some are you have to really go inward and answer them. And some you think are not going to be as deep, but then they end up being deep. And it's I never knew that about myself, that I would answer it in this way.
Do you have any failed dreams that you've given up on, Jenny?
Never.
Oh man!
But
and why? And why?
And I absolutely love those.
What's the obstacle?
Put being a marine biologist because I get seasick, and that's exactly how it happened at the age of 12.
Yeah, I remember you
that's
saying
really
that.
sad.
Yeah, I think you shared that story in a sermon
Yeah,
once.
I did. Yeah. That was
But
true.
but I love the idea of being curious because it does bring stuff out that you wouldn't necessarily go there on your own.
And there's the understanding of the value of it. So this past year, the birthday survey came out, and I was it's not a big deal. He probably sends this out to a bazillion people. It's going to take me a half an hour. I didn't get done, and I didn't even complete it because I just didn't think it was important. But over this past year, I understood that he actually cares and that the things that I answer actually have value. And so as soon as it came out, I dropped everything I was doing and I filled out the survey. I did. I was I'm going to show him that I care, that he cares, that he and I can care together about these questions that I haven't even thought about.
Yeah.
And do you think that God's doing the same thing?
Asking
Birthday surveys.
surveys.
No,
What
Here's
book
my
of the
birthday
Bible
survey
is
at
that?
Christmas.
Do you think God, when he invites us into spaces of introspection, say going out into the desert, there
Sure.
are
Yep.
questions on our hearts. Do those questions come from us?
Yeah, I think God is asking us tons of questions, and I think there are questions He's really interested in what we're asking. I think it's a mix of both.
And just like the positive, like it's very common to ask God questions.
Right.
But can you point at times, and I'm sure you can, but can you point at times that God has asked you questions and you sat in it? Is God asking us questions of our souls?
Yeah.
Is he trying
So-
to draw us out or pull us into something or push us somewhere?
So like there's this stuff Alan talks about sometimes, and usually it's like in our one-on-one meetings, but he'll point to a passage from Genesis and then a passage from the Gospels where God is asking questions of humanity, right? So in the Garden of Eden, when Adam
Where
and
are
Eve,
you?
yeah, where are you?
Yeah.
Right, and then in the New Testament with Jesus, it's like, what do you want?
Yep.
Right, and I actually find myself asking those questions a lot in my life now, but they're not questions that like inherently come from within me. Like when I'm kind of walking through that prayerfully and just a time of introspection, like those are the jumping off points. And it's actually really interesting, some of the questions that kind of get birthed out of that. But like, I totally think God is asking us questions. Like, I think it's really helpful in our prayer time, in our quiet time, whatever you want to call it, like to sit in that place and to really process some of that stuff. Because when you think about like our relationship with God, like it's two-way. Right. And I think that's maybe sometimes where a lot of us might get stuff wrong, where we just like, no, we're going to say stuff to God. We're going to ask him questions. We're going to say all this kind of stuff. But any kind of relationship, it takes two people stepping into it. It takes dialogue. It takes curiosity. It takes showing up on both kind of parts of that relationship. And so long answer, yes.
Yeah.
If you remember the question.
Yeah. From a curiosity standpoint.
Yeah.
This is just my own introspection. If my goal is to see God, hear God, sit at his feet, why am I begging him to see me, hear me, and to sit at my feet?
Stetson looks so deep in thought right now.
I've just never thought of it the way that you just laid it out. Like we're asking him to sit at our feet.
I think that sometimes our formats of things are: do you see me? Do you hear me? Are you here? Compared to us asking, where are you? I want to hear you. I want to see you. I want to serve you.
Yeah.
It would seem that sometimes, more often than not, the culture is built around a God that serves us, hears us, sees us.
Yeah.
He has to pursue us, or he isn't actually there.
Yeah.
Compared to, I want to pursue him.
Yeah. The reason my brain went offline for a little bit is because you ended that sentence differently than I would have expected, which kind of exposes like
Right.
that question is okay depending on the posture that you have.
Right.
If you're making God sit at your feet and saying, "Do you see me?" That's different. If you're sitting at his feet
Right.
and saying, "Do you see me?"
That's different.
That's a totally different
Right. That's what
angle.
I'm saying.
Yeah.
I was hoping it would be kind of offensive.
Yeah.
That kind of like, I was hoping it'd be like, ugh.
Yeah.
It makes me feel gross. Yeah.
I wasn't offended, but it broke my brain a little bit. Like I think
You're
of
like,
my,
so who am I in the?
yeah, like I think of my kids, like they're like in 100 different ways, they're asking the same question. Do you see me? Do you see me? Do you see me? Do you see me? And like, I don't know. I think there's just something so exposing about seeing a kid as they relate to their parents. That's like holding up a mirror of like, oh man, what are all the things that I'm doing where I'm just saying, do you see me? Do you see me? Do you see me? Do you see me? But then it can get taken too far where like the image that you place of like, it's not us running around at his feet, but to think that we even could, we've switched it and like he's at our feet.
Right.
That's different.
I think I bring these things up because our past podcast brought up the upcoming season in February and
Lent.
March are coming, and Lent on the church calendar, and the idea of going into the desert. And I think the desert is a place to bring questions and to hope to find answers. And I've been curious about the places those questions come from. And I'm curious of the places the answers come from. I've been on a pursuit tons of times of questions that come from me, and then the answers that come from me. But I think the desert is a place of the questions come from God and the answers come from God. So how do I go on a journey of pursuit of Him, pursuit to hear Him, see Him, and sit at His feet, and give Him the opportunity to ask questions to me instead of I'm sitting on a chair, I'm inviting Him to be by me, and I'm going to tell Him things.
Yeah, that's really good, because I think like this is making me reflect and think, okay, I think this is true. The thought that came to my mind
We'll tell you.
is finding the right answer is fairly easy. Finding the correct question is very difficult. Once you find the correct question, it's like then the answer is like, oh. But I think we're always in pursuit of the answer.
Yeah.
But you're inviting us into pursuing the right question.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I almost think like, okay, so for instance, AI, it's only as good as the questions that you're able to ask. And that's been a fun journey for me because I find myself asking things that are very obscure, or things that
You're not just saying try again over and over again. Try
no,
again,
like it's just
try
like
again.
Uno mas.
for instance, like the Sabbath day journey, that's taken me on a it's been so fun. And it's just like things that I couldn't ever find. But because I can ask the questions and think from a place of curiosity, and then the outcome has been so fun.
Yeah.
So I'm curious of the questions that God is asking us, and I'm curious, just as Advent like brought up these different topics that ask us questions, that the desert asks us questions, the death of Christ asks us questions, the resurrection has to ask you a question. It's like all of these things, if you personify them, they are begging you for an answer.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of times where, I don't know, a situation or a season brings me to a place of asking God, what are you trying to show me? What are you trying to tell me? But it could be interesting in those moments instead to say, God, what are you asking me right now? And see what happens. Instead of like, give me the answer. But it's like, no, you're not. You can't even understand the answer until you like understand the question.
Yeah.
This whole thing has me thinking really just about the importance of the journeys that we go on, right? So as an example, like in the high schools right now, there's like a really big problem with AI, right? You know, like kids aren't doing the work to learn, and they're just typing in, hey, write me an essay, do this, that, and the other thing, which is really funny because teachers have stuff that can totally detect all that.
I would have used that
for sure.
when I was in high school. Too.
I remember having a conversation with one of my kids about it, and it was like, well, if I can get the right answer, like, why wouldn't I use it? It's like, well, the whole purpose of your education isn't just to get you to a place where you get a grade. It's about formation. It's about teaching you how to think. It's about teaching you how to be curious and how to learn, right? Like the things that you actually learn, they don't really matter. Like you're not going to use them in life unless you go into a very specific career field.
Sure.
But
Sorry to all of our teachers out
I know.
there.
I'm
We
so
value
sorry.
you.
But
Everything you do is very important.
But the formation that happens in you as you learn about things like discipline and hard work and studying, like that is the point.
Yep.
And so thinking about like the desert, it's like, well, and even this idea of like questions and answers, it's like, I don't know that answers are ever really the goal. I think the goal is formation. So I think about Job, right? Like, so Job, if you guys know his story, he was like super wealthy, had this big family, but then Satan took it all away from him and God allowed that to happen.
I called him
Job
until college.
Job.
And I found out in a Bible class it was Job.
And so Job is like going through this whole process. He
See, we need our
refuses
teachers.
refuses to get angry at God, doesn't do the thing. But then when Job finally asks a question, God shows up.
Yeah.
And then when God showed up and said, Job, this is who I am, suddenly the questions, they didn't matter anymore because Job experienced who God was. And so when we talk about questions that are asked to us, questions that we ask, I think the purpose is not an answer. The purpose is I want to experience
journey.
God.
Yeah.
It's the journey because once you go on the journey, you realize I don't even care about the answer because God is here.
And it's a whole bunch shorter than you thought.
It is. It is. Right. And I think that's such an important thing for us to kind of hold on to, especially just in our own kind of journeys with Jesus, because we live in a culture that is obsessed with answers, that is obsessed with results, that is obsessed with moving the ball forward.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, what if that's not actually the point?
Yep.
Right? What if the point of following Jesus is not to get the answer to every question you want to ask?
Yeah.
What if the point is not to advance your life or your spiritual growth or like whatever you want to call it?
Yeah.
What if the whole point is just being with him? Because I think when we're with him, we realize that's actually enough.
It's good.
No, I love the awkward pauses. I really do, because it's obviously we're on this journey all together too,
Yes.
and so I think
I
that's
think like here's where I go with that. Yes, if the questions or something is a form of depravity and you're hoping for answers, then just sitting with him is enough.
right.
But if curiosity and questions are fun for you, then it's a form of playing.
What if they're
and
what
like,
if what if
you
they're
know-
scary for you?
Like, I'm not saying don't
Yeah.
ask questions. I think questions are really great. But I think the hope or the heart of every question is like, I want to experience God more. Like, that's kind of
Right.
where I land in that. It's not, abandon questions altogether, because questions often are the things that lead us to God, right? It was true for Job. It's true in my life. It's probably true in your guys's as well. So the questions are important, but I think in the midst of asking them and finding answers, to a degree, they like, I've just got to believe sometimes they lose their value. Not like in a bad way of like, oh, they're stupid and don't matter. It's just like when we experience who God is and like have an actual encounter, everything else just kind of fails in comparison next to that.
Correct. And I would hope so.
Yeah, like even your whole Sabbath journey experience, like ultimately, has that led you closer to God in your
Absolutely.
relationship, right?
But that's been fun. And so it isn't like at the end of the day, I fell on the floor and said, oh, I got to experience God. Nothing else matters. I now have like a testimony to share. I'm like, I want to share in the podcast this Sabbath day journey thing because it's fun.
Yeah.
I think like, yes, at the end of the day, our goal is to sit at his feet, see him, pursue him, go after him. I think there's an intimacy in the concept of, is God asking you questions? That the goal isn't to have the answer, but in the idea of God is asking us things, it gives you the ability to possibly be seen by him.
Yeah.
And there's such a desire for us to be seen by God.
Yeah.
In the birthday survey, the questions that are asked, I'm asking myself for the first time.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing things that I've forgotten about. So being open to being people who in this upcoming season are able to hear the questions God is asking us so that we are being seen compared to being entitled to being seen by the things that we are demanding, the things that we are asking, and our shopping list of things for God to answer.
Yeah.
Does he have a shopping list for us to answer?
Yeah.
Well, I would
Is
hope
he-
so,
yeah.
because if you think about with any relationship, right, that is how the relationship becomes healthy.
Yep.
If it is just one person, if you and I go to coffee
Right.
and all I'm doing is asking questions, and it's not, given back, then yeah, I would say it's a pretty unhealthy relationship.
Yeah. I think all this proves really, really true. And especially by the birthday survey man. I don't know why we're not naming him, but
Steven.
Steve.
Steven.
He
Insert picture here.
I've told him this, but like he is one of very, very few people in my life that asks me questions about me, like who is curious about like the foundational me. He's a brilliant question asker. He's incredibly curious as you're talking. But like, and I've told him this, is like the level to which I feel seen and human is huge. And all of that is fulfilled at the moment that the question is asked. It has nothing to do with the conversation that follows afterwards. It's just simply in the question being asked. It's like, whoa, like someone cares enough to know this piece of me. And yeah, there's something really, really powerful there.
And it's not the how are you doing? How's
Right.
your weekend go?
No, or even
it's
like
not-
the other day, he comes up to me and he's talking and he's like, "So I'm going to ask you this. So what is it about our relationship that keeps us from going forward?" Or
Yeah.
just like,
It's me.
and then I was like, "Does God ask the same thing? Are there? And then should I ask my son this question, my daughter this question? Should I?
Yeah.
I mean, like, brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mentioned this like months ago, and I think you were reading, I don't know if you finished it, but it's the book How to Know a Person.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
In it, like he said one thing that's like really stuck with me. Well, he said lots of things, but this one is at the top of the list. But he said he asked a whole bunch of researchers and journalists and interviewers and podcast hosts and all these things. He asked them, how many times have you asked someone what feels to be like a very personal question and you get back none of your business? And across the board, like he said, the answer is like almost never. Like, and he said, I think we were scared of asking too personal of questions, but there's this deep longing to be seen and like be asked these questions
That's good.
when it seems to be really this key of really being seen and known. And so I've tried to practice that in like encounters with other
That's
people
really
of like,
good.
what is the question that I feel like is too personal to ask, and then ask it and then see what happens. And it's fun. Like, it's really fun.
I can't wait for Steven to ask another question. He's like, none of your business.
So going into this upcoming season, and the season of is something that you prepare for. Like,
Yes.
I think it's
Yeah.
like it's time to pack our backpack type of
Right.
thing. Like, so if I'm going on an elk hunt in September, I'm starting to pack in July. Like, I'm packing my pack, unpacking my pack, and I'm trying to perfect it. And so for this season, I think the desert is built on questions instead of just what should I give up?
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Why?
love that.
Yeah. What I think good questions, like these are going to be questions I ask. And maybe they'd be great questions for you guys to ask as well. But going back to those two that Alan often points back to is, hey, where are you? And what do you want?
What do you want?
Like, as we prepare for Lent, like, where are we?
That's good.
And what do we actually want from it? Right? Because Lent is the easy thing where it's like, oh, I'm going to give up chocolate. so I can lose a couple pounds. You know, like we add these but like we, you know, like a lot of times Lent, like if we do give anything
I
up.
just saw like a 17-year-old Jenny.
I gave up Taco Bell burritos and French fries at 17. I went one time and it was magical. I will tell you
Yes,
that.
yes. But to really ask those questions with this idea of we don't want this season to be wasted.
Yeah.
So where are we?
Yep.
And what do we actually want?
Yep, it's good.
And I would encourage like all of us, like be curious in that process, because sometimes we just sit down and we go, where am I? Well, I'm in Greeley, Colorado. What do I want? Better relationship with Jesus. Like, go deeper than that. Be curious. Like, if you have an answer, be like, okay, like, why do you want a better relationship with Jesus? Like, what do you want to grow? Like, it can lead you to all these other questions that you start to ask. But I think that's a really great jumping off point, because that is the question God asked Adam and Eve, and that is the question that Jesus himself asked as well.
And allow him to ask questions to make you go deeper into those answers, you know, into that journey.
Yeah, and in that too, to even invite God, be like, all right, God, like, how do you want me to answer this? Like, and not to, you know, try to put God's voice in our head or anything like that, but to create space where we can listen and say, okay, God, like, here's my answer, but how do you want me to answer this?
Yeah. Another jumping off point could be, like, imagine a pool with like multiple diving boards. You get to pick the diving board.
How high? Do you
No, they're all equal. They're all the same height.
Equal height.
We'll see.
Is based off of what you were saying, KJ. Like, it makes me want to ask two questions. First, of myself, what is the question I am asking God right now that I'm needing an answer to? And then kind of graciously setting that aside, and then asking God the question, what is the question that you're asking me right now? So just kind of setting aside, it's like, okay, my question's over here now. And just opening myself up to, well, what are you asking me? And see what happens.
Yeah, that's good. All right, so to close our time together, I have some poetry for you guys. And so I buy for food typically the same thing every time I go to King Soopers, hit my grocery list, it just same thing. So I've been buying the same box of rice for years. And that's important. It's simple. I don't think it's more of a filler. It doesn't have any taste. I don't even think about it. I don't read the directions on the back. Same thing. Every time I buy it. And so last night I saw, or I had the thought, I haven't ever read the back of the box before. You know, just like but it's been the same box. Sure. And at the bottom of the box, it said, suggestion. And it said, try substituting pineapple juice for water.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, that's silly. That's like how I thought. Like,
that sounds amazing.
Like, that's so silly. But I happen to have a can of pineapples, and so I dumped the juice, and I had exactly a cup because the proportion is a cup of water for a cup of rice, right? And so I'm like, that's awesome. And so I put the pineapple juice in there, and first I thought, how's it going to boil? Because the water has to boil. If it's kind of syrupy, it boils perfectly. Like I was like, oh wow. And then I put in the cup of rice. I covered it 5 minutes, stirred it up. I would do anything to go back in time and be able to film this, because when I tasted the rice,
hit your knees.
It was like I had uncovered the secret of the universe. Like, this is the best. It tastes like pineapple juice in the rice, and it was like flavorful instead of this is just filler, so I'm not hungry.
Yeah.
That's the prayer I have for our upcoming season. Is this is just a suggestion.
Yeah.
Just try it out.
Yeah.
And it's a very common space. We have been here often. But just a suggestion. And I'm hoping that the podcast can be a substitute for water, putting in a bit of pineapple juice, a bit of joy,
That's
some
great.
flavor, some hope. And thank you for joining us. It's been fun.
Yeah.
It's an honor. Thanks. We'll see you soon.